Hello, hello, everybody. I'm Mary Claire, and welcome to Peak, the official Grow Sport podcast. Brian, welcome back.
It's good to be here.
Game on. All right. So last time we covered in your new book, The Culture Code, we covered chapter 4,
Mhm.
and that was all about the structure and the process by which to get your organization strategically aligned. So mission,
Right.
vision, values, objectives, goals, higher level goals, team goals, and those key performance activities that are going to help us kind of identify what do we need to be doing on a week to week basis. What we skipped over and we're going to dive into today is okay, I'm strategically aligned, but now I need a strategy by which to execute against this.
Yes.
So, this is rather timely because this morning I was in a conversation with a client where this conundrum, so to speak, was like real and meaty. So, this is an organization that believes they have their mission and vision values, kind of that the why, so to speak, in order. And they've gone through strategic planning year in and year out. And the kind of second tier team feels like, yeah, we have these conversations and we have really good discussions and we think we make decisions, but then you come out of it, you're like, well, but they don't know what to tell their team on where we're going or what
Yeah.
we're doing. So
Right.
Um, so there's a question of whether they're actually strategically aligned, but let's assume they are. Now we got to have this conversation around strategy. So today, what we want to cover is how do you actually develop a strategy against once you're strategically aligned. And I'm living in it right now. So Brian, you're going to teach me.
Well, I love that you're having this experience because, um, well, I don't love it that it's painful. I get
Yeah,
that, but I love that it's so normal, right? I mean, if
yeah,
so many organizations struggle with this, and how many times have we been called in to help build a strategy, right? Let's get a
yeah,
strategic offsite. Let's go meet together and figure out what our strategy is, so that we know what to do this next year. In a lot of ways, that's a misnomer. It's a misused term, really. I mean, what we really have shown in the last time we got together was that if you build a strong strategic alignment so that we know what our mission, vision, values, our objectives, we know what our goals are and how we're going to go after those goals. This strategy is really then defining the methodology or the way that we're going to go after those
yeah.
goals, right? The how.
The
And
how.
so there's actually some steps that we can take to identify what those things are that we should do that would make it effective to, implement what it is we're trying to accomplish. So how do we do that? And what are the steps? And that's what we're really going to get to today is the actual steps you can take to make these discussions effective as you talk through them.
So, and what I want to be clear on, I ask this question all the time of like somebody says, well, can you help me with my strategy? And they're like, well, what? I always ask, so what do you think a strategy is? And a lot of people don't have an answer, and they admit it, which I am so happy about, and kudos to them.
Yeah.
It is a tough thing to say what is it, because you just said it's kind of a misnomer. People use
Yeah.
it to describe all sorts of different things. So I'm going to peg you now down on the how. What I want to
Yep.
be clear on is just as a reminder from last time, and you set up, and I'm going to say it again. This presumes that you have a mission and vision, values and objectives that you've agreed upon, and goals.
That's correct.
Most people believe you come up with the how before you say the rest of it, and we're flipping that on its head.
And you have
So
to. You have to. Otherwise, you'll just keep churning on this year after year. If you do this every year and feel like you're not getting great strategy and vision around what it is you're trying to accomplish, you're doing it backwards. If you get really strong strategic alignment first, then that will inform your strategy, which can then inform backwards in a circular cycle some of the other things that you've done. But you've got to do it in that way.
I think and I'm going to speak for myself. What's tough about that is that when I think of strategy, before there's truth in what we're about to talk about, what I'm saying, but I think of it as big picture market, like what's going on in the market and where's the opportunity. And when I think of strategic alignment, I think of the plan, the aligned, broken down plan by which to that we're going to move towards that.
Yeah.
So tell me, so now we're getting into the how. So we're saying, no, we're going to let's define where we need to go, what we're going to do. And now we're going to pull it back up almost in some ways. Is that fair?
Yeah. Yeah, it is fair. So let's start with the word. Strategy comes from the Greek stratego, which means the view of the general. It's really the vision of the general. So to your perspective, it is a high level view of what's going on as it informs the actions that we take in order to accomplish what we're
Yeah.
trying to do.
Yeah.
So all of these things, they impact the decisions that we make based on, they can be external factors, internal factors, competitive factors. This is where strategy is difficult at times. But if you don't know who you are and what you're trying to accomplish and where you want to go, no strategy is going to matter.
Yeah, it's true.
Because you have to understand what you're trying to accomplish in order for the strategy to be applied effectively and appropriately. So let's take some examples. Let's say that you're UPS and I'm FedEx. Okay. So you can say there are certain things. The very first thing we have to identify, and once we've said who we are, we're a package delivery company. Okay. We want to get packages from A to B. Okay. Now let's start talking about, first of all, and this is the first step. I'll just outline this, is you need to understand what it takes to do this business. What are the table stakes in this business?
Yeah.
So we can list a couple of them, right? It's like, if you can't get packages from A to B, you should get out of this business. That's one, right? Maybe if you can't track packages,
Yeah.
that's now. Now, by the way, that may not have been a table stake 20 years ago, 30
Yeah.
years ago, but
Yeah.
it is today, right?
Yep.
So if I'm coming in as a new competitor and I'm saying, well, there's certain things that the customer is going to expect if I'm going to be in this business, I better list all of those things and understand all of those things. Because the next question is, I'm going to verify with my customers that they agree, because that's important. Sometimes
Yeah.
we think things are table stakes and they're not. We need to understand. The next thing I'm going to do is say, okay, are we delivering these things? And if so, how? And are we doing them well enough? That's the first thing I want to know for my strategic planning. Let's say we are. Go ahead.
Well, I would say the competitor too. I would ask about from a maybe you're getting there, but how do we in what ways is my competitor differentiating from me? I need to incorporate that into how I go to market, I think. Is that fair?
That's the next step. I love that
Okay.
you said that, because what we're going to do now is we're going to say, where are the differentiators, both for us and for them? So if I look at my competitors' differentiators, these are the things they do really well that we either don't do or don't do
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
And then also the things that we do really well that they either don't do or don't do well. So again, if you take this package delivery, which is very instructional, if you go back 20, 30, 40 years and you say, all right, in the beginning, we had a situation where the strategy for FedEx was overnight delivery. And this informed a lot of what they did, because they're saying, we do this well. UPS does not do this well, nor does the mail service do this well. It's a place we can do really well.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
now going to inform our strategy. We're going to buy planes instead of trucks. We're going to, create systems that allow for very fast turnaround pickups, things that allow us to really make that work. Now, you can imagine if you went out to the customer and said, hey, do you care about overnight delivery? And if they said, no, we don't care about overnight delivery,
Yeah.
then all of that's a waste of time and effort. That's why you
Yep.
have to verify with your customer.
Yep.
But to the extent that the customer says, yes, that matters to me, now we can differentiate and do that differently than our competitors. That's a competitive advantage. That's a strategy. That's something that we do to accomplish an outcome that our competitors are not accomplishing. All right.
Okay. So let's say, well, I'll let you keep going. I want to come back to the goal, this iteration of like, okay, I've identified that, and then I look at my goals, but keep going.
Yeah. Well, let's say that your goal was to increase, revenue or market share this year in the package delivery service by 20%. Let's say that's your goal. And then you look at strategy and say, okay, how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to win in overnight delivery. Okay, well, overnight delivery means then we've got to build a fleet of planes. Now that might inform a goal, right? You might be like, okay, that now becomes an objective or a goal for us, either in the near term or longer term, that we have to accomplish, because we can't do overnight delivery without planes,
Yeah.
as an example. So you can see this circular impact on, okay, I first need to know where I'm headed. I can come up with a strategy. Now that strategy might come back and influence some of the goals and how I implement those goals in order to make my strategy work. And my ability to do those goals might also impact my strategy.
Let's, what's the danger, or I'm going to presume there's a danger in, let's say we did that voice the customer work and kind of understand the customer's perception and why, in my world, the old world, why do customers make the choices that they do? And how are we
Right.
differentiated versus competitor, right? Um, and we identify those differentiators, and then this connection, it's this when to do it, right?
Yeah.
And so let's say you did that. Separately, you come up with your goals, and then you audit the voice of the customer relative to the goals.
Exactly. So you're hitting on something that's really important, Mary Claire. So many times executives feel like strategy creation is an event. It happened in an offsite when
Yeah,
we were all together and
yeah,
we mapped it out. That's almost never the case. You take a first stab at what you think your strategic advantages are and how you deliver value to the customer, and then you have to iterate on a very intuitive way over time what you
yeah,
see happening and what you see the customer wanting. Take IKEA, great example. They didn't start off realizing that flat box shipping was going to be key to their success. But over time, they watched their customers try to get their product home, and they realized they had one of two choices because it wasn't working on the top of the car. They're either going to have to put in a major delivery service, which, by the way, some companies did, or they were going to have to recreate the product in such a way that it could be flat box shipped home on their car, right? In the back of their car.
yeah,
And
yep,
then they started to measure things like how wide is a SUV? How long is the bed? How, if the seats fold down, how long can they be? This started to inform all kinds of strategy. How did they develop and design their product? How did they box it? How did they store it? What warehouses would they need? What kind of systems and machinery would they need to get it up and down and out to the customer? How would the customer shop? All of these things were iteratively discovered and fed back on goals, because then you can imagine a goal being like, wow, now we got to implement 5 new warehouse structure systems
yeah,
that we didn't
yeah,
have before. Do you see what I'm saying?
yeah, I do. Okay, so we've got our goals, we've identified where we're winning, where we're losing, and the table stakes. And we've compared that relative to our goals. So tell me where we are in the process and what's next.
Yeah. So first step was what were the table stakes? Second step was what are the differentiators? So
Yep,
what are the things that we do better than anybody else and how can we maximize those? And let's test those with the voice of the customer. Let's make sure
yep,
they value those. And then what we can do is now we can take a step back and we can say, all right, where are we going to put our focus and our excellence in this strategy going forward? Let's pick 3 to 5 things from our table stakes list and from our exceptional list. And let's say these are things we must do at a very, very high level if we're going to succeed and win. A great example here is Toyota. Toyota had this back in the 70s and 80s where what they said was, okay, we're in the car making business, table stakes, we got to deliver a car. That car has to have seats and a steering wheel, has to have tires, and it has to run about 100,000 miles. That's where we were. Actually, it wasn't even that, it was about 70,000 miles at the time. That was the table stakes. Then what they said is, you know what? We think we can differentiate on a quality level that will go much longer than 70,000 miles. By the way, we're not going to provide all of the wing ding whistles and bells that everybody else has. We're going to focus on quality. We think our customer cares about quality. And that informed all kinds of decisions that they made about their line, who could stop the line, when they could, how they would fix things, and to ensure that that quality happened.
hmm,
And then those started to inform their goals again in terms of the number of cars that they sold, what kinds of cars they sold, and into what markets they would sell those cars, which then fed back onto their strategy again. So this becomes, hey, we want to play in this market. We want to sell this many cars. How are we going to do it and in what ways? So this then informed the strategy, which then fed back on the goals.
I'm not sure where this is going to come into play, but where my mind goes is it's yet another argument that strategy is an event. It's an ongoing.
Ongoing iterative process. And you have to think about it that way. So when you review this, think of our best customers. Once we set the strategic alignment in place, then we work on strategy over time, and we have these reviews with them
That's
where they
true.
can say what's
Yeah.
working, what's not working, what does the customer like, not like, and what should we change. So first step, table stakes. Second step, differentiators. Third step, choose from among those 3 to 5 things we're really going to focus on,
Yeah.
right? And then we're going to create a plan to improve the delivery of those things to our customers. And that leads right into what will we stop doing? What will we start doing? What will we continue doing at the same level of excellence? And what must we do at a much higher level of excellence in order to succeed? And then you have a plan that you're going to go run for a period of time with our KPAs that we talked about. And then we're going to come back and review what worked, what didn't. How does that feed back onto
Yeah.
everything? mission,
Yeah.
vision, values, goals, objectives, because that strategy might identify things that are or are not possible as we go forward. So that's our review process. We do a halftime review, right? Get that done at the
Quarterly.
half year point. At the end of the year, we're going to review again, and we're going to take a very intentional and purposeful view of what's working, what's not, and how does that alter or shape that strategic alignment so that we can get it now modified incrementally for the next year. And this then becomes a virtuous cycle.
And those, I think this is where I believe the model really separates itself with the KPAs, because there's tangible evidence on why things are not working or not
Correct.
working, because you know it's documented what you've tried and what you haven't, versus hearsay or theory,
That's right.
which is tough when you're running an organization or at the next level down. It's data, right? It's data to
That's
inform
right.
a decision.
That's right. And if you're going to be a data, it's so interesting because again, the sport methodology that we use mirrors sports in real life. And right now it's the data that drive the decisions, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I love it when they're on there like, the data says you should go for it on
Yeah.
4th and 2 within
Yeah.
the 40. Well, there's just been so many data points that you can start to make decisions by the data. We're trying to collect those data points so that you can make decisions by the data. What's actually working? What's actually having an impact or not?
Yeah, that's well said. Okay. Any other thoughts, Brian, on the how for developing your strategy? Any words of wisdom?
Just that this is not going to be an event. You're taking a first stab at this, and then you're going to go and exercise it. You're going to work it, right? I mean, you're going to go and take it and try it and find out what works and what doesn't. Carefully listening to your customer, carefully taking feedback, and then molding that back into your objectives and your goals, and maybe all the way back to your mission, vision, values over time. But the point is that this is an iterative, intuitive process. You're going to take your best stab up front, but then you're going to have to work this in order to figure out what's the best.
Yeah, it's an art and science thing. The science
That's
being
exactly right.
the process is the science. That's tried and true, and the art is the listening and the little decisions and tweaks you make within that, while leveraging the process within that to adjust your strategy. So
yeah, that's right. That's right.
Man,
it's really interesting. Just one last little story. This idea of strategy really came from the Romans. It's been used in all civilizations, but the stratego, the application of the word, and the whole idea was the Romans, going down and attacking their foes. And at the time, their enemies really felt like there was no way that the Romans would be successful. And what they decided as a strategy was to take their elephants over the tops of a mountain range in order to attack their enemy. And the enemy didn't think that the Romans could get their elephants over the top of the mountain. And that made the difference. Elephants over the mountain made the strategic difference. But you can see how, it's like, we want to take this city. We think our strategy is to get elephants over the mountain. No easy task, but if we could do it, that would make all the difference.
Yeah. And then they made thousands of little decisions to make sure the elephants, or to try as hard as they could to make sure the elephants got over.
It informed everything, right?
Those are the KPIs.
Food, what kind of, those are all the KPIs. Yeah. That's exactly right.
Man. Well, I love these conversations when I continue to learn. So I hope it was a learning experience for everybody out there. We'd love to continue this conversation in this connection between strategic alignment and strategy and the art and the science that's related to it. So feel free to contact us. Visit us at www.growth-sport.com. Feel free to reach out to Brian and I on LinkedIn. Happy to chat more. So Brian, thank you for joining today. This was another fun conversation. And for all you listeners out there, if you enjoyed this podcast, please like and follow us on Spotify or wherever you may get your podcasts. So until next time, we hope your drive towards peak performance is successful. Talk to you soon.